When Calamity Ganon rose its disgusting head from underneath Hyrule Castle, nearly all Hylians were doomed, not by the calamity itself, but by malice that corrupted the emergent ancient Sheikah Guardian stalkers from the 5 pillars surrounding the castle. The entire mechanical army of the Sheikah was suddenly under Ganondorf's control, and now he would unleash their destructive power on the crumbling kingdom of Hyrule, its army, and then the entire Hylian race. A genocide not seen since Demise's invasion. The capital, Castle Town, was burning, overrun and torched by stalkers, which were now hunting after any Hylian they could find. The lowlands were a death trap, so the surviving Hylians began to flee from the mountainous and fortified eastern provinces of the kingdom. Unfortunately for nearly all of them, it was for naught. Soon every house, village, and escape route in the lowland were surrounded and trapped by stalkers, which brought nothing but death and destruction. With their powerful beams, these guardians plowed their way through screaming Hylian men, women, and children as they attempted to flee from their incinerated homes, towns, and villages to safety no matter where. Excluding Link and Zelda, every Hylian overtaken by the Guardians was killed on that tragic day. Then came the silence as the fires of burning towns, villages, and corpses slowly extinguished when Zelda finally faced the calamity on her own for the next 100 years. A once prosperous, densely populated, and mighty kingdom had in a matter of hours been turned into a deserted wasteland of abandoned carts and ruins. The kingdom of Hyrule was no more.
Hyrule in the age of the burning fields and the era of the wild is a wasteland. But what if Link and Zelda's victory and the princess's ambition to restore Hyrule to its former glory? Perhaps there's hope for the villages that ceased to exist 100 years ago. Or will Ganondorf in his floating castle make sure that lowland Hyrule will remain the land of the dead? Today, we look over the most crucial ruins and how they might be used or even rebuilt in the sequel. But first, as always, leave a like and subscribe as we start with no other than Hyrule Castletown. Once the great and proud capital of the divine kingdom of Hyrule, today it's nothing but a wasteland of ruins and infested with enemies' castle. Let's face it, Castletown is toast. It was a great capital, but underneath it, doom was hidden for tens of thousands of years, and today nothing except the castle and town walls remain. Everything else was leveled and covered in thick malice during the calamity, including the Castletown prison, which inmates and guards appears to have put up a fight against invading guardians. Historically, we see examples in wartime where prison guards either let out inmates, left them to die inside the cells, or sometimes when there's a common enemy, team up to fight the invaders. It looks like the last option could have been what happened in Hyrule Castletown prison, which put up a heroic last stand. However, just like the rest of Hyrule Castletown, its fate was sealed 100 years ago. The same goes for Mabbe Village and the ranch in Hyrule Field, which were overrun right after the Guardians slaughtered everything and everyone within the walls of Castletown.
What we're trying to explain is that the current Castletown and Mabbe Village probably belong to the past, as Hyrule Castle is about to leave its current location, and it's more likely that the current capital will be moved to the Great Plateau. Naturally, to explain such a move, we actually have 2 videos you should check out on the Great Plateau, including the settlements in its immediate area. But what about the smaller settlements, villages both big and small? Creating a Champions pages 392 to 397 explore the former Hylian settlements outside of Hyrule Castle, and they also show maps of former Hylian population density and how much a genocide the Great Calamity was for these communities. In fact, out of all of the corners with Hylians, only the southern eastern Hylian settlements survived the calamity, and even then, far from all of them, as you will soon see. This now brings us to Dea Village. This particular ruined settlement is surrounded by hills, also known as the Hills of Borma, meaning that this village was completely unaware of any of the events going on in central Hyrule. The hills block their line of sight. Not only that, the village itself is a literal death trap. There is only one way in and one way out through this canyon. If and when the Guardians would discover this place, the inhabitants would not stand any chance of escape.
Quite ironically, the evacuation route set up from Central Hyrule passed next to this village on the other side of the hills, meaning that if they were aware of the situation, they could have joined the evacuation line of civilians fleeing from Central Hyrule to make their way through the dueling peaks to Fort Hateno, and from there to Hateno village. And this is where the missing piece of the puzzle for their village comes into place: Scout's Lookout. When visiting this location, it becomes perfectly clear what the purpose of this lookout was intended to be. Scout's Lookout has a perfect vantage point of both Central Hyrule and Deya village. Whoever was stationed here most likely signaled Deya village to warn them so that they could join the evacuation line through the dueling peaks and towards Fort Hateno. We can only hope there was someone there to notice the signal. The villagers would have had little time to collect their belongings and join the other Hylians fleeing from Central Hyrule before the Guardians would overrun them. However, it is possible that there were survivors from Deya, and that the descendants in Breath of the Wild 2 might have an interest in restoring the village to its former glory. In particular, since the village is located in the immediate proximity of the Great Plateau, but that might also be an issue if Ganondorf decides to land the moving castle on the plateau. But who knows? Perhaps the reconstruction of the ruined settlements were already underway when Link and Zelda confronted Ganondorf.
Under these circumstances, Gopanga village might actually be a better option for reconstruction. For one, since it might have had some survivors during the calamity, as there is a direct route leading from the village to Kakariko. Secondly, from their vantage point, they would have been able to see the calamity happen with their own eyes, not to mention the nearby garrison that would have been able to assist them. They would not have been able to see what was happening on the fields of Central Hyrule, but they did have a clear sight of Hyrule Castle, and thus Calamity Ganon and the Guardians heading out of the Sheikah Pillars. Creating a champion revealed a possible evacuation route towards Kakariko village for the people of Gopanga, although it is unclear how successful this evacuation would eventually turn out to be. If they would have been able to realize the danger in time and flee the wetlands under the protection of the soldiers from the nearby garrison, at least some would have made it out alive to reach Kakariko. The only way for them to reach Kakariko safely was to take Sahasrara slopes through the canyon to ultimately reach their goal. Though all of these evacuation routes seem doable, we know for sure that although a valiant effort was made, most did not survive. Remember, most people in these villages would not have been nearly as mobile as Link and Zelda, as they would be dragging their families and the even more idiotic bunch bringing their personal belongings. Anyway, how can Gopanga or Deya intertwine with Breath of the Wild 2? Very simple. Imagine that during Link's temporary return with Zelda to a jubilant Hateno, after seeing the legendary couple in the center of the village, an NPC knocks on Link's door in the middle of the night. Confused, Link opens the door to this villager, who informs him that his/her family was originally from Gopanga, and with the calamity gone, he aims to fulfill the pledge of his family to restore the village to its former glory. This goes in line with Princess Zelda's ideal, who convinces Link to join this effort, much as was the case leading up to the original Zelda 2.
There is hope for living descendants from Deya and Gopanga villages. Nevertheless, to the northeast, in close proximity to Hyrule Castle, we find another victim of the calamity, Rauru settlement. With its size and little significance, it is most likely that this settlement was simply unfortunate enough to be in the path of the destruction, as the ultimate goal in this region would not have been this tiny village, but rather the military training camp just above it. No Guardian husks can be found here, indicating that the Guardians crushed this place with very little resistance. Unfortunately, no concrete evacuation routes are known for this location, as well as the military training camp for that matter. The biggest chance of survival, if only for a little while, would have been to join the group that ultimately fled and fell at the Kala Citadel. Next, we have the Sage Temple ruins to the southwest of Castletown, close to Regencia River, which in the present has been submerged by the river itself. Who exactly lived here is unknown, but since this was likely a place of worship, it is unlikely that any soldiers were stationed here, meaning that the Guardians would have no trouble trampling down this ancient site. Further uphill, on the border of the Hebra and Central Hyrule, we find another interesting location, the ruins of what was once the Royal Ancient Tech Lab, the main pre-calamity lab of the Hylians. Although it seems like most of the actual testing of the Guardians was done at the castle courtyard, this lab still seems to have played an important role in the research of ancient Sheikah relics before the calamity. According to Purah's diary and Robbie's memories, Purah and Robbie originally conducted their Sheikah technology research here for the royal family, along with Princess Zelda, before they were forced to flee during the Great Calamity, which resulted in the lab's destruction.
Creating a champion states that the thoroughness of the destruction of the lab seems to have been deliberate. Judging by what little is left of the site, it could have been damaged from the inside. One theory would be that one or more of the Guardians were kept here. As soon as the calamity was set into motion, the Guardians could have sprung to life and ravaged the lab from the inside. Luckily, none of the key players like Pura, Robbie, or even Zelda was present at the lab at the time of its destruction. Even further up into the Banfur region, we find Banfur village ruins, the only Hylian settlement in the Hebra province. With all other settlements concentrated mostly in Central Hyrule, Necluda, and Akala, this lone undefended village did not stand a single chance against the approaching Guardians. A reason for this might be that the inhabitants never expected the Guardians to reach the village, which was much closer to Rito village than the epicenter of the attack at Hyrule Castle. In fact, it is possible that Banfur was most likely one of the last locations that were attacked by Ganon's army before the party was halted by Princess Zelda. Had this played out moments earlier, Banfur might have been saved. Still, we have way more to talk about when it comes to the potential of Banfur village and the Hebra province, so be sure to leave a like on this video, and if you haven't already, subscribe to the Commonwealth Realm and press that notification bell for all notifications on when we upload to not miss when the next episode goes up. We also need to thank all of our gracious patrons. We welcome you to join at patreon.com/commonrealm. You can also join by joining as a member here on YouTube. Cool new perks are incoming. Anyways, thanks so much for watching. We'll see you all next time on Commonwealth Realm.